Welcome to the NextGen Economy podcast, where we explore young, fresh ideas that have the potential to impact the next generation of our economy, and with a focus on innovations that are tied to real-world issues. I am your host, Stanton Wong, and today we have with us Julian Alvarez of Mindflow, an education platform for personal growth and life skills that ties into Web3 with crypto and NFTs. Welcome, Julian.
Hey, what's up, Stanton? Good to be here.
Thank you very much for being with us. So I did a quick introduction of what Mindflow is, but I might have missed some stuff. So would you want to elaborate a bit more on how you would describe Mindflow?
Definitely, for sure. And you caught us in an interesting moment because we're like in between our second to third pivot. So we're kind of like pivoting in a slightly different direction, but a bit of an overview, and could dive deeper. Is we started off like building a learn to earn platform where you're financially incentivized to learn, and we'd use a model similar to the play to earn game Axie Infinity, where you buy an NFT, gives you the ability to learn and earn for proving what you learn. We moved away from that, pivoted to to basically hosting personal growth competitions that people could sign up to compete, pay $25. You earn points for completing positive actions in different categories or areas, such as like relationships, wellness, like doing push-ups, sit-ups, reflections, like journaling prompts. Seek discomfort, do things that make you feel uncomfortable, and learning, right? Learn something, reflect on it, and whatnot. And now, like, based on how many points you earn for completing those quests, that will determine where you rank on the leaderboard. And your ranking then signifies what rewards you end up earning in the form of money and NFTs, where NFTs represent like these digital trophies per se. So that's kind of like where we last have been. And after running 2 seasons of the Mindflow games, the insight there is that we got over 400 quests completed. That's 400 actions that people took on things, which was really interesting. We got people to take action in interesting ways. But the real question that we dug deep into there is like, why did people take action, right? Like, why were people able to do things that they maybe hadn't done before, especially for some things they had the intention to do? And there were several like answers people gave us. Like, one, it was convenient. It was really nice just to receive actions every day on a silver platter. It removed the friction from having to figure out what to do. And second, it was gamified, right? Like, you were earning points. There was a leaderboard. If you won, you could earn some rewards. And like, for those that even had their friends competing or colleagues competing, it was really motivating to want to beat them. So the gamification there is interesting. And then third, finally, we noticed that the social experience and community experience of the people participating was really powerful. Like, people were really engaging with each other. There was social accountability from seeing other people do awesome things and wanting to like replicate that yourself and be inspired by it. So that's what we're doubling down on based on that product insight. We're now building a social app that makes it fun and easy to take positive action in your life and close the gap between your current self and your next self, who you want to become in this next iteration of who you are.
Oh, very cool. So I want to take a quick step back because I participated in season 0 of the Mindflow games. And I want to help highlight a bit on what the actual experience was like for that, because I think it will apply to your pivot as well with the social aspect of things. So the 5 types of quests that were kind of shared for the Mindful games was around reflection, health, learning, seek discomfort, and relationships. Right? Would you be able to give me an example of what each of these might look like? So what would a reflection quest be?
Yeah, for sure. So reflections are like journaling prompts. So for example, write down 30 things that make you smile and try to note any patterns that exist in that. Or like identify your top 5 role models and what are common characteristics that they each share. Kind of like meaningful things that help you reflect and learn more about yourself. It's kind of like writing is a tool for self-discovering and really bringing that out. Then in health and wellness, we have things like exercise, like do push-ups, gym, go for a run, whatever it is, or things like meditation or doing the Wim Hof method, a breathing technique. Then you have seek discomfort. So this is to help you become comfortable with discomfort, since most of what we all want is on the other side of fear and discomfort. So help you train that. So for example, go to a coffee shop and ask for free coffee, or go to a public place and blast your favorite jam and try and start dancing in front of people. So things like that. Then you have learning. Will typically give you like an article or a video to watch and learn, and then you reflect on that and share. You can share those lessons with the community of other people participating. And finally, you have relationships, right? I mean, relationships magnify the human experience. So how can you not only nourish existing relationships, but also build new ones? So this might be quests like write a gratitude letter, share it with someone, or reach out to someone you haven't talked to in over a year, or we'll host like a metaverse community bonding event within the participants of the tournament. So it's a little bit of what it looks like.
Awesome. I'm a huge fan of alternative educational methods, and to me, these 5 topics are really powerful because it's not what's traditionally taught in education, like in school, and kind of bringing this up and incentivizing people to try these different quests, I think, is very powerful, especially as a kind of just general reflection, or getting you out of your place of comfort is really powerful for personal growth. So I personally really enjoyed participating. And the other thing I want to ask about is the structure of the initial games, how you organized it. I know that you're slightly pivoting, but I think it's worth talking about the gamification and the leaderboard aspect of things, because that will also apply to your pivot afterwards. The games are time boxed in the sense where you have a few days to do them, and then there's a leaderboard, right? So how do you think that this kind of incentivizes people to play or to be more willing to try to achieve these different tasks?
Yeah. So several things here, and a lot of this gamification has to do with like behavioral science that backs up how this influences human behavior. And that's what we're essentially doing. We're figuring out ways to leverage gamification and behavioral science to gamify people taking positive action. So for example, if you're earning points for doing positive things, those points in a way represent your progress. And that it naturally kind of like inspires you to feel like, wow, I'm making progress in a positive direction. And the points that you earn are kind of like a symbol or a measure to signify that. So we want to feel naturally that we're progressing, and the points help with that. Second, the leaderboard has this really interesting behavioral science principle that says when you're being observed, which in a leaderboard, you kind of are being observed and even like ranked and evaluated. So when you're being observed, you're more likely to act in alignment to how you want to be perceived by the people around you. So for example, if you're at a party and your friends are drinking, you'll probably, to fit in and be cool, may want to drink. If you're at home and your roommate's watching like TV, you may naturally like be invited to like, oh, it's like, oh, okay, watching TV, it's an okay behavior. You want to like fit in and you kind of want to like meet the standards of the other individuals. So if you're in a community and this tournament like Mindflow, and everyone's like taking positive action and growing and becoming better, then it's like, whoa, like, okay, I'm going to take positive action too, because I want to be perceived as a growth driven person that takes positive action in their life. So that's kind of like a powerful behavioral psychology principle. There's a lot. Last one I'll mention as an example is we innately have the desire to want to like win, especially for some of us that are like very competitive. We want to be the best. We want to feel significant. It's a human need to feel significant. Some feel it more strongly than others. So winning kind of helps satisfy that. And that's why when you have a leaderboard, you want to be at the top of the leaderboard. And even for some people, they told us they were like in the middle of the leaderboard, but what motivated them to take action is that they just didn't want to be last or be at the bottom. So it works in many different ways. But you also need to be careful because it could also be discouraging and detrimental, right? Like if you want to win and you put in a lot of effort, but then you end up getting like 6, then you're like, oh man, I didn't win. And even though you took action and made some changes, you may feel dissatisfied. So that's why like the gamification is good, and this extrinsic motivation around wanting to become the best or earn rewards like money like helps, but you have to be very careful not to let the extrinsic motivation kind of cloud the natural intrinsic motivation that really like is what's necessary in order to achieve lasting change, which is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, that's really powerful, because obviously there's short-term benefits to the extrinsic kind of incentives, but with anything that you want to keep sustainable, it has to be from within. So kind of the pivot that you've been talking about into more social and just trying to figure out how to build more intrinsic rewards into the system to incentivize users is going to be really critical to have a education or learning like personal growth platform that really helps individuals grow long term.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's the nut to crack in this iteration. But yeah, like, so for example, one thing we want to experiment with is in this social app where basically it's very similar to what we've described, but there's no like start or end. It's you just basically get like 2 or 3 daily quests, dependent on like what categories you care the most about. And once you complete those, you share them on your social feed and you get to see your other friends taking action. So now like we want the main like motivation to be like a social experience. I want to see how my friends are growing, and I want to grow together with my other friends and keep each other motivated. And one of the things we want to test here is like, what if there's like no rewards like money in this instance? How much does that affect motivation? And should we even have things like points, or kind of like build something that has so much intrinsic motivation that you don't need a lot of the extrinsic? So different levers to pull there and to figure out.
This reminds me a lot of Strava. So Strava, the app and the company, their goal was just to make it so that cyclists could show how much they cycled, right? The distance, the expected calorie burn, etc. And the only feature they really focused on was being able to share this in a very kind of nice UI. So, and what it created was essentially a community of people who wanted to share information with each other. And it wasn't about like how far you went or anything of that sort, but it was just about like being able to kind of show that you committed and did something, and be able to cheer each other on in that aspect. So it sounds like that Mindflow is also moving in that direction, but focus more on personal growth quests that will kind of take people out of their shell or push you a little bit further to develop some kind of skill, or essentially become a better version of yourself in some way.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the idea. And many, like some of these apps like Strava and whatnot, like they focus on a particular domain or niche, like fitness and whatnot. We're a little more generalized, and more like kind of like nurturing that fun element of the different ways in which you can grow and creating an ecosystem around that. So we'll give people like that, we assign like 2 to 3 daily quests, but we also want people to be able to determine what habits they want to work on and personalize that for themselves as well. So that way you get some exploration, you get some quests given to you, but you can also determine specifically what you want to do on a daily basis and get the balance of both of those.
Oh, that's really cool. So you would be able to kind of optimize for your needs in the sense where you could say, like, I want to focus more on health and wellness, for example, then you would get more health and wellness quests, versus if you were saying like, I want to seek more discomfort. So I would get a few more seek discomfort quests than usual, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So you can kind of like opt for that. That's something we want to test, because there could be like a downside with that, in that, like, who the hell wants to seek discomfort? But maybe you should do it anyway. Um, so it's something to test and see like how personalized. Basically, there's this question of like how personalized should it be? Um, and that's something to like play around with and see what works best for people.
Excellent. So I want to kind of dive into purpose for a little bit. With NextGen Economy, one of the big questions always is, what is the purpose of the company? What is the purpose that you're trying to solve? The specific term that is used is massive transformative purpose, MTP. So for Mindflow and yourself, how and why did this project get started, and what do you perceive the purpose of it to be?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with mine, because Mindflow is a derivative of my purpose. I think that's how we must be aligned in the work that we do. So my personal MTP is to empower myself and others to discover and manifest their infinite potential, right? To basically discover what they're capable of creating, becoming, and achieving and giving in this life, and create a world of abundance. Now, backtracking a little bit, like, how did this even come to be? Well, I've always grown up being very ambitious. I've been ambitious ever since I can remember. There was something within me kind of like pulling me forward in a strange way. But this ambition initially manifested itself as a desire for wealth. I just wanted to be very rich and very successful for whatever reason. So it was great. Like, I felt a pull, but what I hadn't realized then is that because this ambition was very self-centered, it was limited in its power. And so I did a few things, but I didn't do much in alignment to what I felt internally. For the most part, I overdosed on video games. I never really read unless I had to for school. And my health was like whatever, didn't really care, and whatnot. But then I went to a Tony Robbins seminar when I was 19. I was very hungry for it because I felt very misaligned with this ambition and the action I was taking externally. And I basically like had a lot of breakthroughs, learned so much wisdom about identifying limiting beliefs and breaking them, and emotional intelligence and the values of giving and contributing to something beyond yourself. And the natural byproduct of all of those newfound values within me that I cared about was that I defined a purpose that was much greater than anything I could ever be myself. And when that mission, when that sense of purpose and service was in service to something that went beyond myself, to the contribution of all humanity, it became so compelling I could no longer ignore it. And I became captivated. And the shift was so freaking massive that I was like, whoa, I could have lived a very like unfulfilling life if I would have never figured out how to identify and unleash this like giant that was sleeping within me. So I became pretty obsessed of like, whoa, if I was able to unlock this within myself, thanks to like the help of Tony and other personal growth wisdom, then this must be possible for others, right? How can you help others realize that they have way more potential than they actually realize that they have, and not only help discover it but actually manifest it? So that sparked this obsession with trying to figure out how to do it. And since then I've gone to like 6 Tony Robbins seminars and have just like been kind of obsessed in this world of personal growth. But I didn't actually move in the direction of working on this until what was it? What kind of sparked this was that around 9 months ago, I fell into the rabbit hole of NFTs and Web3 in this world, and I discovered the play to earn game Axie Infinity, and it kind of blew my mind that you could make money from playing this freaking game. And I became fascinated, became an investor. I basically bought these NFTs, the Axies, and bought these teams and then lent them out to people across the Philippines and Venezuela so that they could play it. And then we would split profits from the money you get from making the game, the crypto you earn. And that became a passive income vehicle. But I saw firsthand the economic impact that playing this game was having for these people. And I was like, what in the world? Like, how the hell is this game like the best economic opportunity for these people? Right? Like, I loved what it was creating for them economically, but I was like, they're playing a freaking video game, right? What if you could do something a little more practical here? So that's what kind of it's inspired the idea of learn to earn and the obsession with how to figure it out. And yeah, now to kind of close here, not ramble too long, Mindflow's mission is to inspire a generation of lifelong learners to take joy in becoming 1% better every day, because that notion of becoming better, of becoming your next self, is the holy grail of personal growth and discovering what you're capable of becoming, creating, achieving, and giving in this life. It's all of your potential unbundling. So we want to create lifelong learners, and to do that, you have to achieve lasting change, not just change in the moment, but change for the long term. And so that's what we're figuring out and trying to do.
Wow, that's incredible. I want to just highlight your history a bit, because if we kind of just see, this is firstly not your first company that you're running. You ran, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but Viz or Vize,
yeah,
previously, and that was also to help. It was help people from either an education perspective or something, but to essentially improve their professional lives, right?
Yeah.
So that's
exactly.
something. And then you also went into, you're also a software engineer. And so one of your previous jobs was as a software engineer at Meta. And the team that you specifically joined was the social learning team. So again, you're in the education side of things. So this is very clearly it's reflected in your history that this is a very strong passion of yours. And you're currently also running your own podcast, Inventing the Future podcast. And that's also about essentially highlighting visionary tech entrepreneurs. And in the end, it's also about education, showcasing what other people are doing. And so it's incredible. And it's just your resume really highlights your MTP is very, very legit. And that's very, very impressive.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I work hard all the time, because I'm not really working, I'm just having fun. And I'm living in alignment with something that is very purposeful and meaningful. But yeah, and it's interesting you highlight that pattern of like education, learning. And the way I see it is that if I want to empower others to discover and manifest their infinite potential, I really believe that education is the key that unlocks that potential, right? It's like learning about the right mindset or the right mental tools or frameworks can empower you to like take meaningful action and actually make the changes you want in your life. So that is like why I've gravitated toward that direction. And I think most people that struggle to become who they want to become or achieve what they want to achieve, just like haven't developed the right mindsets or don't have the belief systems or structure or identity that they require in order to move in the direction and take the action that's required to do what they actually want. So a lot of it is you leveraging education to be able to unlock that.
I want to go into Web3 really quickly as well. So Axie Infinity, you mentioned earlier, and you also described kind of their learn to earn model. So I want to kind of connect that to, for Mindflow, part of it is, leveraging Web3 in some way. So how do you foresee Mindflow using crypto or using NFT?
Right. Yeah. So we were initially pretty Web3 native when starting off with the learn to earn idea, because this signified using tokens as well as creating our own token. Basically, the way it would work is that we create 10,000 NFTs. You buy one of these NFTs to be able to access the learning experience and earn tokens for proving what you learn. And the tokens that you earn enable you to then purchase a new or mint a new NFT, right? So that was the primary utility of the token. We kind of like moved away from that initial model because we were a little wary of the Ponzi scheme nature of things, and that the main focus of why people would be buying this would be mainly to make money rather than learning. I still think this model can work pretty well, but we're like archiving it for now. And now that we're going in this direction with like the personal growth competitions, the Mindflow games, as well as the social app, what the main thing we're kind of like leveraging and highlighting is NFTs. We're not really using crypto anymore, but we are using NFTs. And the way to think about NFTs and how we're using them is that the NFTs can be thought of in, or are used in like two ways. Like achievements, like trophies, and then badges as well. So think about it in this perspective. If you play a tennis tournament and you end up winning, you get a pretty trophy, right? And if you're professional, you also get money. But this trophy that you get, it kind of becomes an emblem to symbolize this achievement. And it's not only an achievement, but it's also a memory of that experience. And if you put it in your room, whenever you see that a trophy, you'll be reminded of that experience of having won. So we see NFTs in this similar fashion, right? If you end up winning the Mindflow games, or if you, for example, complete 100 Seek Discomfort quests and you earn the like Seek Discomfort champion achievement, those will be NFTs that will be exist in your wallet. And anytime you look at your wallet and you see those Mindflow NFTs, you're reminded of this achievement. And the powerful thing too is that, one, it's a reminder. Two, there's this interesting idea around your NFTs starting to craft an identity for you, right? So if I do 100 Seek Discomfort quests and I earn a Seek Discomfort champion achievement in NFT, now I'm starting to craft an identity like, oh, wow, maybe I am good at seeking discomfort. And, you know, acting in alignment to the identity of who we perceive we are is one of the strongest forces in human behavior. So those are kind of the main things. And then the final thing I'll mention here is how you can add utility to these NFTs. So one thing is just like, it's an NFT, cool, looks pretty, good memory. The other thing is that we could add utility to this. And for example, we'll be creating a Mindflow profile where you'll be able to display your achievements that you've earned. This could be like useful in two ways. One, if you want to connect with other people using Mindflow, you can see what achievements they've earned and be like, oh, you have like the Seek Discomfort champion achievement. Like, cool. I want to like reach out and see like how are you able to do this and do such uncomfortable things, right? Or the other would be like the B2B scenario of applying to jobs. You know, companies today want people that fit their culture, right? So if you're able to share your Mindflow profile with your employer and show how many points you've earned, what quests you've completed, and what achievements you've earned, it kind of like highlights this personal growth journey that's really important in highlighting the growth you've undergone to your employer. So anyways, a lot of exciting use cases for how we're using and thinking about NFTs.
I have a question about NFTs. So one of the big parts of leveraging NFTs would be the transactable nature of it. So you could potentially sell an NFT to someone else. Is there any kind of use case for that for Mindflow?
Not with how we're thinking about it, because you don't want trophies to be transferable, right? If I win first place in a tennis tournament, someone shouldn't be able to buy that achievement. So these NFTs, the idea is that they'll be soul bound, which means they're non-transferable. But why use NFTs versus like just like, you know, normal like badges or certifications on a Web2 platform? The main reason is because of this concept called on-chain credentials. What that means is that you're putting like your achievement on chain, which means on the blockchain. And the important thing to realize is that the blockchain is a public database. If we were to store these achievements for people, we would be holding their achievements in our private database. And because these achievements, these NFTs are on the chain, on the blockchain, that means that anyone can access them or use that information. And this lends itself to a concept called interoperability, which means that those NFTs can exist outside of our platform with ease. So if we, for example, wanted to host a event in the metaverse and say like, hey, you could only come to this event if you've completed like more than 100 Seek Discomfort quests, for example, and have the Seek Discomfort Champion NFT, then we could say, we could do that, right? And it's not our metaverse platform, it's someone else's, but we could like set that restriction through the NFT. Whereas if we had like our own badges and certificates that we like kept account for, we wouldn't have that level of interoperability.
Fascinating. So this is more about trust and transparency in many ways. So
Yes.
Trust is very much about not having it centralized in your database where you could potentially edit things, but it's all kind of visible on chain.
Yes.
Transparency is where, because it's on chain, you've essentially already built an API for it. Like anyone can grab the data, they can leverage it in other ways. And in many ways, you could also look at partnerships with other projects that are maybe either also focusing on education or using these NFTs as kind of, like you said, credentials to limit the people who can participate in certain events. So,
yes.
So essentially, you've made it openly accessible to anybody for the data, for these credentials to be used.
Yes, 100%. And to quickly add on to that, what the transparency point is really important, because this means that you can see when this NFT was created, right? Who issued it, right? Like, did Mindflow give that NFT, or did some like other unknown entity issue that ID? And then you could, this doesn't matter too much for us, but you could see the transaction history, right? So if you were to like swap it or whatever, but ours are soul bound. But basically, you're able to see when did they earn it and like who issued it, which are two very important components that in a Web2 platform, you know, that transparency doesn't exist because it's a private database.
Yeah. Awesome. So the final question I really have is around business model for Mindflow. So obviously pivoting is part of the consideration for pivoting is business model. And originally there was probably a tokenomics model because your focus was on crypto as part of the central aspect of the project. But now you're kind of pivoting away from it. What is the business model for the project? Because to me, I really want Mindflow to succeed. I love the concept. Another way I would describe it, just from the description, is Duolingo for personal growth, in a sense, because you're going to have like little modules that you're competing, getting points, and then you want to incentivize users to keep coming back. So from what you've considered so far, what is the potential business model that you're looking at?
Yeah, very important question. And because this pivot is like maybe like a week old or so, it's something we're still thinking about, but I'll throw out a few ideas that we're considering at the moment. And I guess firstly, because it's a social app, one of the main things there is the network effects we could achieve in being able to grow and then monetize. But a very obvious one is like for every social app, you could have like ads. Like, you know, you're scrolling through a feed, seeing other people do positive actions. You could have ads. The interesting thing about this, though, is that because there's already a specific focus and niche in this social app around personal growth and taking action, the ads could be a lot more targeted to things that would be appealing to these growth-driven people and are related to quests, right? Like if we see you're doing a lot of like, I don't know, meditation quest, for example, we could have an ad to display to you on like by Headspace or whatever. So that's one. Second is this idea of sponsored quest. So basically someone would pay us to do a certain quest. And I'll give you like an example. if you're an author, like you're a first-time author, you just published a book, and in your book you taught people like how to become an expert networker, and in your book you have like you created like frameworks, like, hey, these are the steps to take, or like, hey, here are some questions to help you reflect to like build a better network. Well, we can turn those that like learning, like that framework, into a learning quest, or we could turn the question and the reflection into a reflection quest, and we'll sponsor it. That person pays us, that author pays us to do those quests. And then for doing the quest, we tell them like where this quest came from, who's the author, as well as like, hey, if you liked this content, if you enjoyed this reflection question, go check out this book by the author, or go follow the author on Twitter, whatever. Right. So it becomes a marketing tool. And instead of, think about what the alternative would be, maybe like a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad on like, hey, read this book. It's like, well, I don't know the author, whatever. Versus like, in this case, you are meaningfully engaging with the content. Like the ad is basically like actually going and engaging with the content in a meaningful way. So it's a much deeper form of advertising. So yeah,
Yeah,
the other ideas, but those are kind of like the two main ones we're considering.
I really like the sponsored quest concept, because most ads, the goal is to sell something, but in many ways, if you're doing a sponsored quest, it's more like um, you're providing awareness to other tools that can help you grow. So in that sense, you're almost selling. Maybe selling's not even the right word, but you're like introducing users to new ideas or new education opportunities that also helps make the platform more sustainable. So it's really powerful, I think, from an education perspective, because everyone's learning path is going to be different, and in kind of providing ways for users to find new avenues of education or learning is very valuable. So it's not just you're really not just doing ads for selling sake. It's about finding new opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. And it's maybe the closest analogy I've been able to think of is like when you listen to podcasts, everyone listens to the same ads, but because that podcast is very niche and like, a topic you really like, the ads are likely to be very aligned with something you might be interested in. And in many ways, it's like the podcast host, which you really like, is introducing you to like these new products and services that they think are awesome.
Yeah. Cool. To end, I just want to ask you one question on what your opinion is of where Web3 is now, and where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, so I mean, we're in an interesting time where the market is in a shitty place. And I would advise people, and caution people not to relate the potential of the technology and your perceptions on it based on what the price of these tokens are. I think there's a lot to be said here, but with things like NFTs, they started off being like just art. There was a lot of hype, and that kind of made people skeptical. And like even then, there's been projects that sell out without, there's not like strong backing. And that's kind of created a perception of like, NFTs are scams. People are just creating projects and selling whatever for like hundreds of dollars. But I think you have to dive deep and understand like, what do these technologies enable? Like NFTs, crypto, blockchain, and metaverse. These, I like to think of them as tools in our tool belt, and your potential to solve problems depends on what tools you have to be able to solve those problems. So literally, the better you understand these technologies, the more creative potential you have to solve interesting problems. So market's in a bad place. People may have negative perceptions on crypto, but if you understand the potential of these technologies and what they can do and where things are going, I think this is one of the best opportunities to invest, to build. And I'm pretty obsessed with the technology and where it's going. I think you need to be careful, and because there are scams, you can get hacked, and you have to be cautious. But this is just like an indicative that we're in the Wild West here, and there's a lot of things that the infrastructure still isn't robust. The user experience still isn't great. But just imagine when all of those things become better and the friction is minimized and the security is increased, like adoption is just going to go through the roof. So be a pioneer, learn how these things work, use them in your products and companies if it makes sense. And if not, find investments you feel comfortable of and taking the risk, but hold them for the long term, right? I have almost pretty much my entire net worth in crypto and NFTs. And right now it sucks, but I also don't really care because I understand the long-term potential of these things. And so, when you have the long-term perspective, this like crash right now, like it doesn't really faze me. So
Yeah, no, I'm completely on the same page. I just want to reiterate that for most people, it really should be learn about what is Web3 in terms of what the technologies are and how they will impact the world. If a user doesn't understand why NFTs would be helpful, like why crypto could help with trust and transparency, then it's true, don't invest in it because you don't understand where it's going to go, and you're going to be dropped into scams. You're going to fall for a lot of rug pulls, etc. And then the other thing is invest in the long run. So don't play with too much leverage. Don't play with margins because the market's very volatile. So in that case, thank you very much, Julian, for this. This was an amazing conversation. I'm personally very passionate about education as well, so I loved everything you're doing. And tomorrow's Independence Day in the US, so happy Independence Day, happy July 4th. And that's all we have for today. Thank you very much, Julian.
Cool. Thanks for having me. Great questions, and happy birthday, America. Take care, guys.
The NextGen Economy podcast is brought to you by Exo Angels and sponsored by Island 17, Dream Tank, Exo Economy, and Futureville. Visit us at nextgen-economy.com.
NextGen Economy Podcast, accelerating breakthroughs.